What's up, guys? Welcome to the Writers Roundtable. It's been a while since we've had a roundtable like this, but I don't even know if this is round. I don't know how it views on your screen, but we got Dave Hellman, Rob Phillips, I'm Nick Eatman, and this whole off-season is the craziest off-season of all time, so we can just get right to it. How are you guys holding up, though? Dave, are you in the closet? Where are you over there?
I'm in my kitchen. I mean, my apartment's small enough that it's all basically one room anyway. But, yeah, this is the new normal, I guess.
This has got to be the weirdest time. I know you're father of a newborn, so, I mean, it's probably good that you're home some, but how's this been for you?
It's been nice to not miss anything, but this is the one room I can be in right now where I can shut the door and there's not going to be a screaming baby come through. So I'm in the one spot that works for me, but it's been good. We're all making the best of it, right?
I'm telling you, Rob, the greatest accomplishment. You've had a lot of accomplishments. You even won an Emmy. But the greatest accomplishment ever was getting through that question to Mike McCarthy after draft when the baby was screaming in the background and all that. I thought that was impressive right there. So.
Dave texted me after and said, "You realize that everybody could hear that, right?" And I was hoping maybe it was muffled and it wasn't, but that's okay.
You were so poised.
Thank you.
Speaking of conference calls, and we've gotten, this is the new normal, like you said. We got a lot of ways to talk to people. We actually got a chance to listen to Aldon Smith on Friday, and it was the first time we talked with him, and got his thoughts on where things stand. I'll just kind of throw it to you guys. What was your first impressions on what he said and kind of how ready he might be? I'll start with you, Dave.
Honestly, I just came away so impressed. I mean, I've never met Aldon Smith. Prior to the Cowboys signing him, I didn't know anything about him other than he was really good. And then he had a lot of off-field issues that led to him not playing anymore. You name it, I was impressed by it. He was ready to talk about all of the uncomfortable facets of where he's been over the last 5 years, from, prior arrests to suspensions to his problems with addiction. Talked about how losing his grandmother last year really helped wake him up and made him realize he wanted to turn his life around. And then, the confidence, I think the last thing he said on the call was, I don't care that I've been gone for 5 years. I feel great. I feel like I've been in shape. Like, somebody asked him about, the long odds of coming back. And he was like, what are the odds? I don't care. I was like, damn, man. Okay.
And how long was that pause after that?
Very long.
The awkward part. Rob,
it was a very long pause.
What odds? It was like, oh, and we Rob, you and I talked about it afterwards. Like, it's any sport, and we can't think of a prominent player that's been gone for that long, 4 years, and come back. And so this is definitely new. I mean, maybe boxing it happens, but that's because they need money, And I mean, but in this case, the Cowboys, I think, are counting on him to be a pretty productive player.
Yeah, and one thing he said on the conference call was he's a very fit 285, which is heavier than what he played at in Oakland and with the 49ers, but it's adding muscle. He's a stronger player. That's what Mike McCarthy thinks he's going to be than he was with the 49ers when he was a big-time pass rusher for them. They feel good about the shape that he's in. I think in a previous interview, he also said, I don't have the mileage on my body that I've had the past 4 years. So if you want to look at a silver lining there, he's 30 years old, but he hasn't had that pounding of 4 years in the NFL.
And I don't know exactly what kind of defense they were running in San Francisco all the time, but I know he has played some 3-4 outside linebacker. So in this scheme, it might be a little different. I mean, you might want to be a little heavier to play, defensive end in this scheme, even though we don't even know what this scheme is. I mean, we talked about it. It's going to have 4 linemen, but I think we're going to see a lot of different looks, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I hope it's a little bit of everything. I mean, he played a lot of outside linebacker with the 49ers, but if the guy's 285, I think he can handle putting his hand on the ground just fine. That doesn't mean that's all I'd ask him to do. I really hope Mike Nolan tries to be as multiple as possible, because you talk about Aldon Smith. We've talked a million times about how Jalen Smith has the athleticism and the build to rush the passer, maybe not as a full-time defensive lineman, but certainly situationally. There's just way too many intriguing athletes on this team to not try to mix it up. And, it's a bummer that we're not watching OTAs to kind of get an idea of what they might want to do. But I'm really intrigued at what a guy like Aldon Smith can help them do, on multiple fronts.
You guys touched on Jim Tomsula coaching him in San Francisco, and that's important for knowing his skill set, but it's also important for just knowing the player and the person, because I think people want to lump this signing into past signings the Cowboys have made with guys that have had trouble off the field, had problems off the field, and having a guy that knows him and respects him and knows exactly what he's been through. I think that's a built-in support system that maybe, first of all, every case is different anyway. But I think that's something that needs to be brought up, that this is a guy that's coached him and knows what he's all about. And I think it's going to work out. I think he's got a great chance to work out.
There's a lot of examples to that. We don't have to go through all the players, but everyone has, like you said, everyone's got different issues. I go back, and this is going back a little bit, 2004 maybe, but I remember when Parcells brought in Terry Glenn. Terry Glenn had been around, it bounced around, had some issues maybe in Green Bay, but Parcells was like, I know this guy, I know the player, and I think that and we didn't hear any issues really of Terry Glenn, and God rest his soul. I know he's no longer with us, but he was a great player for the Cowboys when he was here, and I think you're right, that connection of the coach knows him and knows how to get some things out of him.
Yeah, it's such a unique circumstance, and honestly, you've seen it work out to varying degrees across the board. I know, people want to point to Greg Hardy, and that clearly did not work out for the Cowboys on any front. But it was also, that was a much different investment too. They gave Greg Hardy a lot more money. Like Aldon Smith, not only do you have the infrastructure of the coach that he knows and a little bit of familiarity, you're not paying this guy very much. I saw somebody on Twitter the other day compared it to a lottery ticket, and that's exactly what it is to me. It's a very small deal for a guy that has a tremendous amount of upside, and that's what makes it so favorable, in my opinion, is that there's just not a lot of risk here.
Yeah. Two big differences here also, because Greg Hardy, to me, like just by listening to the interviews and stuff, he didn't really want to make changes. He didn't really sound apologetic about things and didn't try to make a change. Aldon Smith said on the call, I'm not trying to make changes. I have made changes. I thought that was really impressive for him to say that.
Yeah.
That's going back to me being impressed is, I think y'all would agree with me. We've been doing this long enough that you can kind of tell the difference between when a guy is like rehearsing something he was told and he's like, oh, let me just get through this interview and they'll leave me alone and I can play football. And that's not what Aldon Smith sounded like at all. He sounded like a guy who knew exactly what he was about, knew exactly what he's been through and exactly where he's going. And, I can't guarantee what that means for the future, but I just think there was a really significant difference between what we just heard from Aldon and what maybe we've heard from guys in the past who weren't as genuine about it.
And Dave, you brought up the money, what his contract is. There's people that are skeptical of this signing, just that he can be what he was in 2012 when he had, 19 and a half sacks. I don't think the Cowboys are asking him to be that. I think I'm going to throw a Moneyball reference at you from the movie when Brad Pitt, they lost Giambi at the A's, and he said, we're going to recreate him in the aggregate, right? We're going to use a bunch of different guys to create the production that he had. And Robert Quinn's 11 and a half sacks, that's a big loss. But if you get Aldon Smith back to be somewhat of what he was, Tyrone Crawford gets healthy, the rookies, Bradley and maybe you get Randy Gregory back. All those guys together can help supplement that production. I think that's more what they're looking at. And hey, this guy is in great shape. He might be able to really be a lot of what he was a few years ago. We'll just have to see.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. I guess the floor would be Aldon Smith is one of 3 or 4 guys that could help you replace that production. And the ceiling is Aldon Smith is an incredible player and he can do it all on his own. So, if that's your floor, that seems pretty good to me. And hopefully anything you get beyond that is just a fantastic bonus.
I will argue just a little bit that if they do it by committee over there and the teams continue to double team DeMarcus Lawrence and kind of keep him where, at bay like they did last year, then that could be a problem for the defense, because Quinn was giving you 11.5 sacks and he was creating problems for the other side. So if it's guys that you're not too worried about and they can just kind of control DeMarcus Lawrence, then I think that could have issues. Then that leads to a secondary that you don't know what those guys can cover. So I do think you need that dude. And if Aldon Smith is that guy, that would be great.
I agree with you, but I can't help but think about the fact that, like, Robert Quinn had 11.5 sacks. He tore it up last year, and it still didn't always help DeMarcus get the favorable matchups that you would prefer. And where I go to with that is hopefully Gerald McCoy can be that interior pass rusher that he has been. Yeah, I mean, if you have a 3 technique that can consistently make life difficult on the offense, then hopefully that's going to help DeMarcus Lawrence out. Dontari Poe, for that matter, I know he's more of a 1 technique, but still a guy that's got some history rushing the passer.
He is a 1 technique.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. But my hope is that they can get more production from the defensive tackles than they have, and that would hopefully help not just DeMarcus, but whoever's playing on the right side.
And it also all flows together, too, because you get that going in the middle, and maybe it frees your linebackers up to be a little more productive than they were last year, a little more covered up where they can roam and make plays and help the running game. Because when they didn't stop the run last year, we're talking about pass rush for sure, but when they didn't stop the run, that's when they had problems last year for sure.
Well, we're going to just talk about some other topics real quick. Hey, Rob, real quick, when's Dak going to sign? Real quick.
I don't know. Let's throw a dart against the calendar and find out. Anytime between now and July 15th, hopefully, right?
Okay.
That's the goal.
I got you. Okay. July 15th at 1:30 p.m. Central Time.
Just before the deadline. Okay.
90 minutes before the deadline.
What is he going to sign, though? New deal or the tender?
I guess it could be one or the other, right? Because neither has happened yet. I'm
gonna steal this line from Todd Archer, who we had on the break earlier this week, which is, if I had to say right now, I would say he'd be signing the tender. But in a month, maybe I'll feel differently, because like that's what the Cowboys do, man. Like they get the wheels rolling right when they have to do it. That's been their track record as long as I've worked here. So it sure as heck looks like he's going to be playing on the tag right now, but all it takes is a couple phone calls for that to change very quickly.
I'm with you, Dave. Like, we got through the draft and free agency was productive, and I don't know if we're bored, but this has become the focus again, and it's happened with Tank and it's happened with Zeke. It's this big hot topic, and it's a problem until it gets done. And when it gets done, everybody's happy. I mean, there's a chance, I guess, it doesn't get done by July 15th, but you're right. Like, it only takes a little bit to get momentum going, and then it can be done pretty quickly. So there's still time.
I'll just say, I just don't see, there's nothing happening that's going to prompt that conversation to start before, like, July 15th is basically Dak doesn't have any reason to want to sign right now. The Cowboys don't seem to have any reason to want to spur the negotiation. So I just assume it's going to sit like this until at least mid-July, and then maybe we might see some movement.
The only thing that could happen probably not in Dallas. They're in Kansas City and Houston.
Yeah, that's true.
If those things happen, if maybe Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes or those two guys get a deal, that could change things for the good or bad for the Cowboys. I mean, there's so many things.
I lean toward thinking that would change things for the bad, because Dak is like, oh, you see what that guy just got? And the Cowboys are like, right, we're not going to give you that. And so he's like, all right, well, then I'll play on the tag and see what I can do next year.
Mahomes is so far on a different stratosphere for what he's accomplished and what he's done. Watson, that's closer to me. This really seems to me a lot like, and Rob, you'll remember, both of you guys will remember this, on the Dez thing in 2015. Wasn't it Demaryius Thomas? Like, they were drafted at the same, and they were very similar in their numbers. And I believe they both got a deal the same day. They signed
basically the same deal within 20 minutes of each other.
Yeah.
Like it was ridiculous.
But that's another example. Like we didn't think Dez was going to get done, and Dez was threatening not to play on the tag, and lo and behold, July 15th rolls around and they get it done. I'm not saying for sure it's going to happen, but Stephen Jones is right. Deadlines often make deals.
I mean, just think back to a year ago. Like we were at a fever pitch. Like, what could you get for Tank? Like maybe they'll try to trade him. Like
right.
Negotiations are at an all-time low. Like it's very contentious. And then DeMarcus picked up the phone, and like 18 hours later, the deal was done. Like it always happens this way.
The plan was to talk about Aldon Smith and then some rule changes, if there are any, or maybe what McCarthy said last week, and it always goes back to Dak. That's okay. That just goes to show there weren't a lot of real, major rule changes to talk about. We can talk about that later on. And McCarthy had some good stuff to talk earlier in the week, but we'll get some with that. We'll talk about some of those stuff next week. And I'm very confident by saying I think Jordan Lewis is going to join us in next week when we do another edition of Writers Roundtable. All right. Well, guys, stay safe. Have a good weekend. If it is the weekend, I guess it is Friday. Who knows?
Who even knows?
Right.
All right. All right, guys. We'll catch up with you next week. For David Hellman and Rob Phillips, I'm Nick Eatman. We'll see you next time on the Writers Roundtable. See ya.